But I want to talk a little bit about the Spartans here, because this is an interesting team to me. I've always felt like they were possibly on the precipice of something larger, and they still could be. The disappointing part for me is I do think that the Ugochukwu injury has kind of affected the rotation for a guy that was a borderline starter. He started a few games, but he was also the backup point guard and really was a good option behind Fears, and then also provided the ability to kind of be next to Fears and the other guards as well. I thought that was a big loss, with the fact that they were already a little weaker in that section of their roster, and then they've got the rotation of number twos, but he really was a key part of that, especially with his ability to play point guard.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely hurts. One thing that this team has had a lot of questions about has been the shot creation outside of Jeremy Fears and the ability to handle the basketball. And Divine Ugochukwu is a talented player, and he was growing in that as the year went on as well. It was unfortunate timing for the injury, because he got hurt in that Minnesota game, which was right when Tom Izzo made the change to the starting lineup, moved Scott in, and it looked like he had kind of figured out what he wanted to do with his guard rotation. You were going to have Scott there. You were going to have Divine coming off the bench as the backup one, maybe playing a little bit of the two alongside Jeremy, depending on where things are at. But then Divine goes down in that Minnesota game. It obviously doesn't help to lose that Minnesota game as well, adding insult to the injury. But you put yourself in a situation where you've got to go around it. But this team's been doing that from the beginning. I think a lot of people forget about what Caleb Glenn could have been to this team. We see him every day now. He's helping run the scout team in practice as he's recovered from his injury. They didn't want to bring him back and burn his eligibility for half a season, which definitely makes a lot of sense. But he was going to be a big part of this roster, too. And so injuries have definitely played a part this year, a little more than they had last year, for sure. Last year they were really healthy. This year wasn't as much, and it does make an impact. But I think there's still a lot of good things this team's been doing over the last month that kind of give me hope about heading into the postseason, but also it's kind of been a situation where this team has its flaws, and we know what those are, but also this team seems to have enough to most nights be able to overcome those and play with anybody in the country.
I agree. And that I think you hit it on the head there with the idea that they were settling on what I thought was the ideal situation, with Divine coming off the bench. He can play both spots, but you start with Scott. He provides a good defensive lift there. You could see him having an improvement arc throughout the year with being a rookie and having a lot of potential. And so I thought that was the best use of resources. I'm glad you brought up Glenn, because that's what I was referring to with the injuries at the beginning. That would have been a huge difference. Then you get rid of him, you get rid of Divine, and now you're down to some of the other folks. And it just seemed like nobody really rose out of that. All of them had decent games when you're talking about Kerr Tang or Trey Ford or Jordan Scott, but there wasn't necessarily somebody that rose above the rest. Then the other guy that has always intrigued me about this team, aside from the obvious ones, but I'm kind of looking at the younger depth guys now, was Cam Ward. And he got that injury at a key part in the year where it felt like that stunted his development a little bit too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think the last time that you and I talked, we were in Fort Myers about to play in that tournament, and he had looked really, really good. And then he got hurt in that game on Thursday against North Carolina on Thanksgiving. And it was about learning to trust it. I talked to him about it at the beginning of January, about kind of getting back to where it was. And he said that it kind of affected him a little more than he thought in different ways. We talked about, like, the defensive side of things. It had an impact because he's like, if somebody hits it, I'm going to grab it and they're going to go by me. And they know that and I know that. And so adjusting that was different. And then getting himself back to trusting himself again. I think that we've seen that from him. And I think we've seen some development from some other guys too that didn't play as well in yesterday's game in Ann Arbor. I think that there are some reasons behind that. We can get into yesterday's game if you want in a minute, but Cam Ward, I think, is going to be a big piece for this team down the stretch and also in the years to come. I think Cam Ward is going to be a force in the Big Ten over the next couple of seasons because he's got all of that ability.
Oh, I agree. And I think it's a good idea to talk about the game yesterday because I think this is an interesting storyline that, may not be over. That's the other part of this. So we'll talk about that big in-state rivalry matchup here with Zach after the break. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
From the GarbarinoRoofs.com studios in Granville.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
Coming back with Zach Surdenik of the Spartans here, Spartans host, and talking some Spartans and Wolverines too, incidentally. But that's why I'm interested in this, Zach, because I think I think one of the more interesting things that happens in sports is teams, whether it's in the NFL where you play the teams in your division twice over the course of the year with the possibility of matching up if you both make the playoffs. That's what we've got here. We've got two chances, obviously one a little bit more likely than the other, of Michigan and Michigan State playing again. And although Michigan has had almost everybody's number, they're a pretty dominant team by a lot of standards. They're obviously ultimately beatable. And I would love to see these teams match up for a third time, but I'm curious what some of your thoughts were about the second time here.
Yeah, so I think that from a Michigan State standpoint, there were a lot of positive things that you can take out of that game in some ways. Obviously, they're not taking a moral victory from a rivalry game or from really any game. That's not what this program stands for. But when you're looking at things to take away from it, I think that Tom Izzo said after the game that some of the issues were very correctable, and I would agree with that. I think that the length bothered some of the depth pieces for Michigan State. Jordan Scott had 2 points. He made some nice plays defensively, had a big spot. Kurtang hit those 2 threes in the first half, but didn't have anything else. No other bench points with Cam Ward getting into some foul trouble. And so those moments are things that you can learn from. But at the end of the day, Michigan's a really good team, and they had a really good night. Jax Lendeborg played out of his mind. Felt like he didn't miss in that game, hit so many big shots, 5 big threes in that game, most of them coming in the first half, but a couple big shots in the second half to really help put Michigan State away. But I think that the lasting thing that I left with talking to kind of people around, whether it be staff from either side or just people in the arena, everybody seemed to feel like these teams were going to meet again on Sunday. We'll see if they will. Obviously, both teams have to win 2 games to get there, but very few people in that arena seem to think this would be the last time that these two teams would see each other.
Exactly. I'm actually going to be going to the Big Ten tournament this year here, so I'm leaving for that tomorrow, and I'm curious about that. Big G, what do you got?
I'm going to the Big Ten tournament.
We're still feuding. I gave him a chord in the break here a couple breaks ago, and I asked him if that gained me any points, and he said only 1 point. It was only singular. I couldn't even get a basket. I just got a free throw. He's just looking at me now. We're just going to continue with the conversation,
I'm
Zach.
about to tee up.
but hopefully that's TEE, not technical foul. But no, Zach, you bring up some great points with that. It's an interesting matchup, and these are two teams. I thought this last year too, with particularly Michigan State, because I know that they may have been kind of in the last tier of however you wanted to do the tiers, but I did think that if things broke right, the 3-point shooting kind of got hot for an extended streak during the tournament. I did think that they were one of the sneaky teams that could have gone all the way last year. Obviously, that's not how it worked out, and but I do think it's kind of similar this year because a lot of their results depend on 3-point shooting, as a lot of NCAA games do, especially in the tournament. It's whether or not you're hot, and with them, they have so many other things that work well normally that if they can just shoot slightly above their average, especially from the outside, that opens up so much, and they're very difficult to beat when that's on.
And I think that with the exception of this past game, that it has been for a while. You look at this stretch that Michigan State went on. They won 6 of 7 before they played that Michigan game, and obviously the loss was the buzzsaw that ran into in Madison, but as we've seen, the entirety of the top of the Big Ten has run into Wisconsin on a night where they're not missing from 3, and it is what it is. But if you look at the way they've played over that stretch, they were shooting the ball really well from 3. Kurt Tang had been playing well. Michigan is an extremely unique team in the way that they're constructed with the length that they have. They're running out Lendeboer, Johnson, and Mara all together. They're switching, and then they've got guards that have length too, Burnett, McKinney, Cadeau. They're all very aggressive in your face defensively, and they switch everything because Lendeboer can guard 1 through 5. And that makes it really tough for teams to be able to do what Michigan State likes to do, and that is to create the drive and kick game, because Michigan doesn't really need to crash because they have a 7-3 guy in the paint that's going to block the shot. And so the Spartans, three-point shooting-wise, Michigan State's best chance to beat Michigan is to get in transition, which sounds weird because Michigan's one of the better transition teams in the country. But the offensive glass and the transition game is Michigan State's best chance against Michigan. The good thing for Michigan State coming into the NCAA tournament in a couple of weeks is you're not going to be playing Michigan. You're going to be playing a lot of other teams that are going to be built differently, and I think a team that has the way Michigan State is built is going to have a really good shot to win quite a few games over the next couple of weeks.
Definitely. And you talk about Wisconsin. I'm just intrigued by this Big Ten tournament as a whole because the Big Ten is very strong, and obviously Michigan at the top. We've talked about them. Michigan State is having a very good year, as we've been talking about the whole interview. But Wisconsin is just, I don't know what to do with them. They can beat anybody, but also lose to anybody. That's kind of what I see out of them. But they would be a team that if they got hot, they're up there. Obviously, Illinois and Purdue have strong teams this year, and I like that it's got the whole field this year. It's going to be very interesting with the whole field in there. But I think the Big Ten is going to assert some dominance in this NCAA tournament because I don't think a lot of people outside of the Big Ten really understood what kind of gauntlet these teams were going through over the course of the season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think that the question's going to become the same thing that it's been for a while now, where the Big Ten over the last few years has been really good and consistently really good, and it's done historically well in the tournament. The Big Ten teams tend to outperform their seed more often than some of the other conferences, but the problem is because nobody's winning a title, they're not going to get that credit. And until somebody in the Big Ten is able to finish it off and get that next national title and end that drought for the conference, I don't think you're going to see the credit that the Big Ten deserves. And so I think that's kind of the next step. And I think that there are a few teams in the Big Ten this year that can get it done. As a Spartan, I think that Michigan has a good shot to do it, which is never the most fun thing for Michigan State. But I also think Michigan State has a chance to make a run as well. I think the ceiling is a little higher for Michigan, but I think that the Spartan ceiling can reach that spot if they play well and if the matchups break the right way as well.
Exactly. And yeah, you're trying to be as objective as possible.
Yeah,
and that's good. That's how it should be. I mean, shoot, Zach, I graduated from Indiana University. We haven't mentioned them once because they're not going to make it very far. I'm objective about them.
You never know. They could get hot. Purdue's not playing that well. Wilkerson could have a bunch of points.
I'm not too convinced on them as a whole this year. They don't have a bad team, but it is a tough conference. And, you look at this, I'm looking at the bracket right now, and obviously the teams at the top we've kind of highlighted, minus Nebraska, who's also had a good year, and they're the first 4 seeds, Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, and Michigan State. And but then, you look at this day 2, even day 1, because Oregon really was set to be, in my opinion, one of the better teams in this conference, but they've had all those injury issues and then ended up at the bottom. But then day 2, you've got teams like Iowa and USC that that have a lot of firepower. Indiana, if somebody wants to throw them in there, they're not terrible. But yeah, then you're working your way up with the Ohio States and Wisconsins, Purdue, UCLA. There's just a lot of depth in this league, and like you said, I do think there's some shining stars at the top that have a chance, and I do think Michigan State is one of them, because one of the things that they have going is that you can see the difference when it's a true Izzo team versus a talented team that isn't necessarily gelling. I think of like the team that they had with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Miles Bridges. That was a very talented team, probably with some of their best NBA talent in recent memory, but as far as how it was working at the college level, it wasn't necessarily there. Whereas this team, especially with the way Cooper's coming on, I think that's worth saying in this interview. There's a lot of things that are trending the right way, and you could see them with some improved 3-point shooting and certain guys getting hot, making a bit of a run and being a tough out regardless in both tournaments.
Yeah, I think that's been something that's been really enjoyable for me. This is my second year working with the Spartan Media Network, and both of these teams the last 2 years have been really fun groups to be around, whether that's at a practice or on the road or wherever it is. It's just a really good group to be with, and I think that translates to on the court as well. I think that they've got a really good leader in Jeremy Fears, who's been running the point at a higher level than almost everybody in the country, if not everybody in the country this year, and that's going to really translate into the tournament. And I think that this group is really battle-tested. They played a lot of different teams. I mean, if you look at it, the top groups in the country, the 1 seeds for this tournament, you've got Michigan and Duke, seen both of those. UConn's in the 2 spot. Played them in an exhibition. Already played Carolina and Arkansas and Kentucky, and then Purdue and Illinois, Nebraska. So many different ways that this team has had to attack other teams, because they're not just playing really good teams, they're playing really good teams that have a lot of different styles. And that's always the way that Izzo sets up his schedules, because they want to make sure that they are battle-tested when it comes to the tournament, because you're going to be playing on a short prep and you're going to be playing against teams that you haven't seen before. And I think that'll be a good thing for this group.
I agree, because that's worth mentioning, even though we know that he does this way every year. That you're inherently going to get a formula with the Tom Izzo team where they're going to be probably a little undervalued come tournament time, because they've played a brutal schedule. They've done that intentionally so that they can make their way through the tournament, because we've seen this in recent years, even in past years, where teams that have maybe been 10 seeds or lower seeds can make their way to the final. In some ways, there's more parity than ever. You've got Miami doing their thing. You've got all sorts of different things happening. So you never know what can happen. So whether or not you're a number 1 seed or a 4 seed or an 8 seed, you can make your way up there. If you're an 8 seed, you then can beat the 1 in the second round and ostensibly be playing who they're supposed to play. So now you've flipped that. So it's not necessarily, hey, we got to get the top seed. I think preparation for the difficulty of this tournament, and like you said, Zach, the idea that they're playing so many different types of teams. You might get a team that's going to go out there and shoot a very high amount of threes. You might get a bigger team like Michigan. That's why Michigan is one of the top teams this year, because they're really good at pretty much everything, and they're good at both. They have the length, they have a large front court that they can throw at you, and they can also shoot threes. But State's got a good, formidable front court too, and if guys start getting hot in the tournament, you don't know what's going to happen.
No, you don't, and it's definitely will be interesting to watch, because it is just a race to 6 wins once you start the tournament. But it's an interesting dichotomy this year, because you do have teams like Miami and other groups that look like they could be really good and they can make a run, but you also have 4 teams right now that are playing what looks like on another level. Michigan, Duke, Arizona, and Florida right now have seemingly separated themselves, but that's the beauty of a single elimination tournament. One game and it changes things. There's a lot of talk about, we might have 4 1 seeds in the Final Four again. We did last year. It was just the second time it had happened, and it was 17 years between those two. And so the odds of it happening back-to-back years are really small. Somebody's going to get tripped up somewhere. There are flaws in these teams. Michigan State led late in the second half against both Duke and Michigan, and both times against Michigan. And so you have a spot where they're not that far off from the top if things are able to go the way that they can because of what they do well. They're going to defend at a high level, and they're going to rebound well. And if they do those things, I think they've got a shot to go far, especially if the three guys that had been playing really well leading up to Michigan, and Jordan Scott, Kurt Tang, and Cam Ward, get back to that level again.
I say this in all the sports, defense travels. And so when they get into the heat of the tournament, they'll have a good chance just based on that. So we really appreciate you joining us here, Zach, and putting up with Big G and I bickering during the interview here. But now he's looking at me again. I got to deal with him for the next 40 minutes here after the segment. So you want to stay on another segment? Just kidding. No, we'll let you go. But we appreciate you coming on. We'll look forward to having you back on, and we'll look forward to watching the Spartans. Want to make sure to send people where they can follow you here.
Yeah, so you can tune into our shows on the Spartan Media Network. If you are in the Michigan area, then you can kind of tune in on your affiliate, or you can go on the Michigan State Athletics app. You can follow me on Twitter or X at Zach Surdenik for all Michigan State basketball stuff, and then some baseball stuff coming soon in the next couple of days. That'll come out, and we'll get going toward baseball season.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about the baseball stuff. He's got a great career going there as well, but he's working on some things there, so wanted to make sure to let that happen. But hopefully next time we'll be able to talk about that as well. Yeah,
won't have to wait too long.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll plan on having you back on because we'll be doing a lot of baseball here starting in a couple weeks. So appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to having you back on soon, Zach.
Sounds good. Enjoy the Big Ten tournament.
Thanks. We'll do. You too.